Now, getting two bikes into the garage of a Heimer might seem to be a challenge, but actually it was very easy indeed. And what I did was I was able to go to a dealer who had one of these particular motorhomes in stock, and he allowed me to measure up. And so I then produced some very accurate drawings of the space inside, and that allowed me to design various bits and pieces that hold the bikes very securely in place. Let me show you what I've done on the inside. Now, we have a two-lay rear cycle carrier that fits on the tow bar of the car, and part of that gadget are a pair of clamps that clamp onto the frame of the bicycle, and these bits tighten up to make it secure, and they fit onto a piece of piping on the actual cycle carrier and keep them exactly 220 millimeters apart. That's the distance centre to centre. So knowing that, I thought, right, I can take these off, and I did, and I found a piece of pipe that fits in here, which is the right diameter. I then made this frame. Now, you should note that there's a channel here into which you can put little nut things, sliding nuts, and then you can tighten things up against this extrusion, and it makes it very firm. But actually, I wanted something a bit cleverer than that, because the top end needs to be secure as well. So what I've done is, and this is the only modification to the vehicle I've made, I've drilled 4 holes all the way through into the area under the step that takes you up to the bed, and I've arranged to have some screws that fit and hold this in place, and this is really secure, absolutely solid as a rock. So this is my main clamping mechanism for the bicycle. The next issue was what happens at either end. Now, that extrusion that I mentioned that's here goes all the way along here and all the way along the rear as well, at about this height. So from my drawing, I was able to work out the design of this piece. It's held onto this bit of extrusion here with 3 screws going into these little nuts that can be moved. And there's a little profile here which is exactly the right shape for the either front or rear wheels of the bicycle. And I've got a Velcro strap which will then secure those wheels to this block. And then at this end, I have a similar block, and again, shaped for the wheels of the front or back of the bicycle. And this time, there's a piece here where it fits onto the extrusion. And this is put in place after the bicycles are in, and that secures the wheels at this end very firmly. I've got a pattern here which I want to copy onto this piece of wood so I can do some cutouts. Rather than cutting the pattern itself out, which I don't want to do because I want to use it to do this other line here, I'm using my bradawl. I've laid my paper with the pattern on, so it's on the edge of my piece of wood, and that's folded over there to prove that's on that line. Then I'm going along the line that I want to cut out with my bradawl, and all I've got to do now is join these dots, and you can see how easy that is. And then on the bandsaw, I'm just going to follow that round. Then this one I will use as a pattern for the others. I've got to make 4 altogether. Well, this is the stage we're at. We've made all these pieces up, and 2 side pieces and 1 centre bit go together to form a little block into which a wheel will go. Now, the ones on one side are a certain size, and the ones on the other side are a different size, like so. These will be joined together with a piece of wood at the back here, and this arrangement then will be secured to one end of the garage of the motorhome. At this end, there is the door into the garage, and so we don't have the luxury of anything to fix this against here. However, roughly here will be the side of the garage. So I'm going to make a little T-piece here, and this will be then fixed to the side, and this will just stick straight out. Each wheel of the bicycle will be secured to its block using a Velcro strap. Well, both of these are made now, and I've just put a coat of Osmo on both of them because if wet bicycle or the tyre of a bicycle is wet, you don't really want it to damage the wood. And this is going to be screwed and removable into the side of the garage of the motorhome, and so where these sort of big sort of bolty screw things go, you want to protect the wood from any damage. So I did a counter bore of 30 millimeters, put a big 30 millimeter washer in there, and there's an 8 millimeter hole through the middle, which allows me to get the bolt through, which holds this in place. Now, this one has 3 fixings, and the other one has 2. And these are Velcro straps. Now, these are used as cable ties. They've got a little loop at one end, plastic loop. You thread through there, back on itself, and that would hold a whole bunch of cables, in this case quite a few in place, or other things. And I bought some of these and I got this wrong size by mistake. I wanted something a little bit shorter, and so I've been using them from all sorts of things ever since. Now, the screws I'm using are ordinary wood screws, but the washer is a dished washer, not a dishwasher, a dished washer, like so. Screw goes in, and this way the load is spread so that we're less likely to get the Velcro tearing away from the screw support. Now, it's really important when you're fixing an eye and the strap on in something like this that you think carefully about how you're going to access it. Now, in my case, this one in particular will be presented to me so I can reach into it from here. So therefore I want the loop on this side so I can see it easily. And it's easy enough to grab the strap from the other side, feed it through, and then back on itself. Had it been over here, I would have found it difficult to access because I can only see in at an angle, like so. So think about that carefully. Now, I need to make a pilot hole through here, and I've got enough material so I can bend this back on itself, and I'm going to have a pilot hole there, and then my screw with the washer will go through the hole there. Now, in order to make that pilot hole, I'm going to use a bradawl. I'm going to judge where middle fiddle is, which is there. Now, you may notice on my bench I've got some holes. These are 3 millimeter holes which are used when creating this top with the path guide system, and they're there in case I want to increase the number of 20 millimeter holes in the layout, which I think is probably unlikely. Anyway, so I've now made that pilot hole. Means I can now stick my screw with the washer through like so. Now, I have pre-drilled some pilot holes for my screws, so it shouldn't be too difficult. So this one that's going in here will be on the same side as that one. So in it goes here. Now, I can't get a normal length screwdriver in here. Just before one does the final tighten, this needs to be at a tangent to the arc which is here. So a bit like so. And that's it. And that's the second one done. And also when you're fixing this, remember which way round it goes, because you want the hairy bit of the Velcro up here so that will fix onto it. You don't want it underneath. So there we go, and that's it. So that's the last one done. So that's all 4 of those. Now, this framework is the runner element for the bicycles as they go in, and it's different from what you would have seen in the video up until now. And the reason is that I was just trialling the mechanism for getting the bikes fixed before I concentrated on the final design of these guides. Now, what I've done is I've created a pair of guides, and there's a left and a right element to each of them, and the idea is that each bicycle runs up through here and then gets fixed into place with those clamps. Now, I've made it as light as I possibly could. It probably weighs about 2.5 kilos, possibly 3, I'm not sure. But I'm perfectly happy with that because it's really important that it's easy to get the bikes in and out. When I had it set up initially, I just had the bicycle wheels running up against the 2 faces here. And the awkwardness was, as the bicycle wheel at the front got further and further away, then it wandered off. So I've got a left and a right, which makes a channel for each of the bicycles for their wheels to go through. So all I've got to do is fit this back in, and we should be good to go. Right, well, I've put the sort of train tracks, it looks a little bit like train tracks. I put the train tracks in place, and they're screwed in. If I bring you up closer, I'll show you how I fixed it. At this end here, I've used a pair of self-tapping screws, one here, one there. And you may not be able to see it very clearly, but there is a metal lip here which goes over here to protect the sort of entrance to the garage. Now, the manufacturers do warn people not to screw anything into the floor of the vehicle because you just don't know what you're going to hit. You might hit a cable, you might hit a water pipe, or something equally as important. However, I'm pretty certain, having seen how this metal strip is fixed in place with screws, that my two screws are in a safe zone. And at this far end, where the train tracks come along, I've got a vertical piece of wood which joins these blocks at the end to the train tracks. And I'm wiggling it as best I can. You can see that's not moving anywhere. And of course, it doesn't need a lot of engineering to keep this in place because the bicycles, once they're fixed in, are going to keep this pretty static. Now, my wife and I have Dutch bikes. In fact, if you've watched some of my videos on Dutch cycling, you would know all about the bikes that we have. Now, Dutch bikes are very comfortable to ride, but it's very much an upright sitting position. And that makes the height of the bicycle here too high to go in the garage. Now, the Dutch bikes have a little trick up their sleeve. There's a little sliding control here. You push that down and then you lift this lever, and that allows you then to rotate the handlebars about a centre, is about there. And that's now reduced the height enormously. You can then refix that lever if you need to. So that will bring the height of the bicycles down by a pretty reasonable amount. And I do know that they will fit in here. Now, because of this recess here, in my scheme of things, I'm going to have the first bicycle going in backwards, which means part of its handlebars will stick into this space, which I think is a really good idea. Now, I have made a ramp to make this process easier, but actually, I think whilst I'm young enough and fit enough, I'm going to continue to do it by lifting it. So there's the first bicycle more or less in place. Notice that we've got folding pedals, and I'm just going to lower this clamp down and tighten it up. Now, this other clamp will flop down. I've got a little loop of string there to keep it in place so it doesn't get in the way. And there's about, I should think, 30 millimeters of space above here, and that's more than enough. Now, this other bike is going to go in forwards, so I'll first of all drop the handlebar like so, and then remember to fold the pedals. Folding the pedals makes it a little bit easier and gives a little bit more room for luggage. So there we go. Now you can see how useful the channels are now, because the bicycle is running in the channels. Now, there's one sort of peculiarity. The two bikes have to cross each other at this point, so that has to be leant over, and that's more or less in position. I'm just going to check the pedal, have that horizontal, and I'm now rescuing my gadget here. Piece of string comes off. I'm making sure that the bicycle is fully forward into the contraption at the end. So that's the bicycles in place in the racks. And now they're in place, I can now do up these Velcro straps. They go through the wheel, around like so, nice and tight, and that's pretty secure. Same with the other one. That's nice and secure. So those are held in pretty well already, and I've got more fixing to do. And then at this end I'm using this block which is fixed to the rail there with 2 screws, and it's a tiny bit of a fiddle getting this lined up. That goes in like so, and the trick is to push this hard against the bicycles, as hard as one can, and then tighten up the 2 screw knobs that go on. Right, so you can see it's just loosely in place. Give it a good push like so, and then tighten it up nice and tight. So that's nice and tight, and then I've got a pair of Velcro straps at this end as well to finish it off. And there's the other. So that's now made a pretty good job, and if you look, there's not a huge amount of movement of the bicycles at all. There's got to be a bit of movement, otherwise things would break. You always want flexibility, like the wings of aircraft. They go up and down. Well, you want this to be able to move a little bit. That's perfect. In case you're curious about why the bicycles are on this side and not on the rear wall, the rear wall seems to be the place where people do put their bikes, partly because there are fixing points for an external carrier for the bikes on the other side, and I think there are places on some motorhomes where you can get the benefit of those fairly strong fixing points. However, my rationale is as follows. The vehicle cannot accelerate very fast. It's not going to push you back in the driver's seat. However, if you were braking hard, then it's a different matter. So therefore, I feel it's better to have the bicycles on this side so that the worst of the G-force will be that way, whereas if it was here and there's a G-force in that direction, then what would tend to happen is that the fixing points, in my case, at the bottom rail and this top rail, could come adrift. And there'd be a lot of force on those bits of aluminium rail. But having them this way, I feel I've shared that worst case G-force of braking equally between the floor and the wall. And I'm really happy with that. Well, that's it for this video about putting bicycles in the garage of your motorhome. The weather's improving. I think we need to go on a trip somewhere. Many thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.